Most people want to live their life fully, to be fully present to and in their lives. Christian discipleship affirms that, but takes it one step further, and that is to say that we are heading towards offering ourselves, to give ourselves to God and to others. Hi, I'm Warren, the rector here at St. Columba's. Glad you could join me today for my message of the day. On Sunday I was saying how I see in Jesus, he is full presence to his life. He is fully present in and to his life. But actually that coincides with his self-offering to others and to God. It's not really just about him, but it's actually about others. But to give himself, he has to be fully present to himself. I suppose it's another way of talking about loving God and loving your neighbour as yourself. Now, I did say on Sunday that I would talk about a way in which we can make that movement from being absent from our lives to being present to our lives, and I used the phrase of surrendering to our own lives, because I think it is common to have a sense of how we hold ourselves back from our lives. So we surrender to our lives, but to move from that to self-offering. But I'm going to talk about that, a way to do that, next Tuesday. Because a couple of people have asked me just to talk a little bit more about this movement from being present to ourselves, to our lives, our self-surrender to our lives, to self-offering to God and to others. And as a little parallel, I thought I could use the 4 degrees of love. If you've been following this Facebook page or the YouTube channel, you will have heard me talk about the 4 degrees of love of St. Bernard of Clairvaux. The 4 degrees are to love self for your own sake, and the second degree is to love God for God's sake. And both of those are love, and both of them are a movement, but they are still self-focused. The third degree is to love God for God's sake, to take us out of ourselves, to love God for God's sake, not for our own. And the fourth degree, which is really quite beautiful, is to love self for God's sake. It might seem self-focused, for you love yourself, but actually it's a selfless love of self. I won't be talking any more about that today, but undoubtedly in the future I will. But the first 3 degrees, they're important because you move from one to the other to the other. There's no shortcut. The first 2, well, certainly the first one, love of self for our own sake, it sort of comes naturally in a way. It's all about me, of course. The second degree, which is still about me, but it's to love God. So we've added into the equation, so to speak. And that will then, with perseverance and spiritual discipline, can move into a higher form of love, which is to love God for God's sake. In my spiritual life, I'm not aiming, though, to love God for my own sake. Even though I have to move through that, pass through that stage, I'm not aiming for that. And when I arrive at it, I think, now I should look at the third stage. I'm actually looking to love God for God's sake. For a whole lot of reasons, I'm not aiming for the 4th degree of love at this point in my life. I'm aiming for the 3rd. That's what I think about. That's what I pray for, to love God, to learn how to love God for God's sake. And to do that, I will move through the other stages. I think moving from being absent in our lives to being present to our lives, to surrender to our lives, to be present to and for our lives, and then to move from that to self-offering is the same. I'm not aiming to be present to my life. I think that's a mistake. That's often what people do. I really want to live my life. I want to be present in my life. I don't want to be absent from it. So I've talked about surrendering to it, and I think that is correct. But that's not the goal. The goal is self-offering. We see this in Jesus. The two coincide. He just doesn't stay with his self-focused about, this is my life and I'm going to live it. It coincides with self-offering. So it moves from a focus on him to a focus to God and others. But you can't attain self-offering without first, or at least travelling through, surrendering to our own lives, to be present to our own lives, to have a life to offer. I think this is important to realise, because it helps us not to criticise ourselves if we think, oh, I'm not a good enough Christian or something because I'm not offering myself. We might still be actually learning how to live our lives, to be present in them. And in that, God will work to bring us to self-offering. It requires faith and perseverance, spiritual discipline, and hope, of course. But that movement to attain that Christ-likeness, if you like, takes time. It's a gift, but it takes time and some perseverance. But like the 4 degrees of love, certainly the first 3, there are no shortcuts. But the goal can be attained. We can learn to love God for God's sake, just as we can learn to offer the life in which we are present to others and to God. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.